downtown in a historic building for weeks on end. And we all felt like we were giving public input as to what would take place. So then you look at these plans on the table about these apartments, and something doesn't seem quite right. So I started looking back through the inspiration for the code, which was the downtown small area plan, which we had hired the Lawrence group to come into our town, talk to the public for a long time about, get a bunch of input, and write. And so here's the language of that downtown small area plan. It says that on page 10 it talks about how new development needs to complement the historic walkable character appropriately scaled for downtown development. Now, when I'm going to just name off a few things that I saw when I was skimming through that master plan. And I'm hoping that everybody on this board will look through that master plan and take some notes and really think about all the public input and look at the pictures in there too, okay? And jot down some of these page numbers and check behind me on this because I'm quoting verbatim some of this. It says that the goal, the way to implement the plan, it says, that they did with public input, was to use form-based code. Form-based code, it says, meets the objectives of the plan. It is a use-by-right development code that meets the objectives of the plan. And here are the strategies of the focused on the form. On page 20, it talks about high-quality architecture, a mix of uses. It specifically talks about enhancing the existing fabric of downtown. On page 21, it talks about fostering distinctive, attractive communities with a strong sense of place. And it specifically says architectural beauty and distinctiveness. On page 21, it talks about conserving open space in critical environmental areas. And I thought, what does that mean? So then I referred back to page 10 where it talks about taking advantage of compact building design as an alternative to conventional land consumptive development. So what we understood about the form-based code, there are no setbacks. Building heights, you don't need those. This is an opportunity to have flexibility so we can work with developers. If we've got a group of trees over here, then it says in the code and the vision that we can work together to save this and give them this. Let the building be a little taller to have more green space. That's what form-based code is all about. On page 28, it talks about engaging public input. And you'll see pictures there of all me and my neighbors and leaders and town staff engaging in that. Here are the community priorities that came out of those discussions, and they're listed on page 28. Number one, building on the historic character of downtown. To me, that says that the code would encourage development that looked like historic downtown in scale and in architectural style. Number two, it says to create a code that would ensure high-quality development. To me, high-quality development doesn't necessarily have to be kind of hoity-toity and uppity development. High-quality development is unique development that is looking at downtown Waxhaw, what we have, and building on that current fabric and creating a real sense of place, not just something that looks like it's along a major highway on the outskirts of Charlotte. Number three initiative was to preserve historic buildings. Number four were housing options with for a variety of age groups, and everyone began to look at apartments under a different light. We all became very accepting of that and understanding how important it is to have different types of residential opportunities in downtown, how that can enrich our neighborhoods. But we were shown pictures of things that we don't see very often that really look like they're following the footprint of our existing neighborhoods on a grid of streets with walkable sidewalks and parking tucked behind. On page 30, you'll see pictures. There's one of my husband. I might be in it too, and some of our neighbors. We're all participating as we did, spending countless hours there with the Lawrence group. On page 31, there are more pictures of people participating and more commentary. It says specifically that people wanted 2- and 3-story buildings. And then it shows more pictures talking about the charrette interactions. On page 102, it talks about specifically what the Lawrence group sketched that their recommendation would be for the historic venture site. Go take a look at that. Page 102, a couple of different plans. And it was more dense than my house and my side of the street, but it was along the same type of footprint. And they told me specifically that they were looking at the footprint of my house and showing me ways that they could actually go a little bit taller and maybe put 4 or 5 apartment units in something called an urban mansion, which I was very impressed with. Looked great. So you'll see a mix of uses on that acreage that they're showing, proposing, that consists of condos, apartments, shops, apartments over shops, a real mix. Got me excited about walking through this grid of streets to some great retail nearby, having new neighbors. Unique and beautiful architecture is discussed on page 103. More on page 104 about the scale of houses. It specifically says mix of houses, urban mansions, retaining the scale of a single-family neighborhood with a mix of options, 4 to 6 apartments in a family-type house. On page 109, it showed some visions for the mill site. On page 119, it talks about central business district. Strength is in mixed uses. That's where it starts talking about narrow lots with street trees and sidewalks and creating this grid of streets. So I just wanted to clarify that all of these things are in this vision, and I'm proud that I participated in that. And I'm sorry that something happened along the way, because the vision was articulated and defined in the small downtown area plan that we hired a Lawrence group to do. Then we trusted the Lawrence group so much. Who better to write this code that is supposed to implement that, that's going to be our rule book, than the Lawrence group? Hired them to do that for us. Everyone felt pretty confident. Now we've got something coming down the pipeline that doesn't reflect this or those values at all, and everyone's scratching their heads. So I just wanted to get up and go on the record as saying, yes, I participated in that. Yes, I promoted Ford-based code. I'm not sure what went wrong. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Diller.
Thank you.
Terry Settle.
Good evening, Terry Settle, 612 North Providence Street, and I'm up here to update you tonight on the Library Association of Waxhaw.
Good.
We just celebrated our 6th anniversary, actually on 9/11, but we gave a reception for our volunteers on Monday. Okay. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. On Monday. I would like to thank Commissioner Maher for attending that, also the director and assistant director of the Union County Library, and the manager of the Waxhaw Library attended. And at that time, we gave a gift to the Waxhaw Library. I had asked Beth Miles for their wish list, and we were able to grant them just about everything on there, and we gave them a check for $1,500 so they could purchase those items. And also at our board meeting, the treasurer reported at the end of August, cash on hand is in excess of $87,000. That's it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Terry. Okay, next up, the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Okay, mayor's report. Just want to catch you up on a couple of things that, a couple of meetings that I've been at recently. Of course, the transportation, the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization meeting was last week, and I know that the P 4.0 project list is of great interest to all of us, and that list was presented as advised by the TCC, but no action was taken because of the timing. They wanted to have the action at our next meeting. But the two key projects, the Highway 16 corridor project and the one portion of the Waxhaw Parkway project are contained on that list for reintroduction into the scoring scenario for P 4.0. So there's that. And then also, again, met with the Western Union County mayors, just had some general discussion, and then we met with the Charlotte Regional Mayors Coalition. Got an update on what the legislature's up to, and as usual, they're up to all sorts of things, and not all of them are in our best interests. Yeah, that's all I've got for this evening. Shall we start with Jim?
I have nothing
Commissioner
this evening.
reports? Commissioner Stewart?
No, when can we get a report on those meetings as far as what took place, the legislation you're talking about?
I can get the presentation that was brought to us by the representative of the league and forward that to you, or forward it to the board. Commissioner Hunt?
Yes, ma'am. I was not present at the last meeting, the passing of my grandmother, and I just wanted to thank everybody for the cards, letters, emails, posts. On behalf of my family and myself, it was greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Maher?
Waxhaw Elementary School came forward with an email. They are desperate need to replace their signage and modernize the signage that's in front of their school. They have a little bit of a dilemma in that they're smack dab in the middle of a residential section, and our sign ordinance does not necessarily conform to where elementary and middle schools actually how they do things with an electronic sign where they're updating the parents and the students on a daily basis. The question I have for the board, several municipalities look at a school and come up with a sign ordinance that is a public purpose to enable a PTO and enable a school to update their students and parents on a daily basis. And would the board entertain the thought of having staff look at the possibility of what a public purpose sign ordinance modification would look like to see if we could help Waxhaw Elementary out as they move, so they can move forward on some sign solution for them? And that's just, it's more of a consensus thing than anything.
They need an answer pretty soon. I mean,
Yeah.
the UDOs were going ahead with that. That'll
Yeah.
change some of that, Lord
But
willing.
but they need it much sooner than that.
Yeah.
They're out there in the
Clarify.
rain holding umbrellas trying to change letters right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Seem to recall is, maybe Martin, Waxhaw Elementary, right? I seem to remember Martin Lane coming before the board and.
He came to us, he tried to call all of us last year, and then we asked him to follow up, and he did, but their PTO president, something fell through the cracks there. PTO president came back at the beginning of this year, sent me an email for some reason, and probably because he had my email and just asked for it. And
Yeah, I thought we had kind of cleared schools off of that.
I thought so too, but then Warren had Max look at the ordinance, and we hadn't cleared them off, so.
No, I thought the digital stuff was just limited to static, like for gas station prices and stuff. I thought that's where it ended.
Very common in other municipalities to have a public purpose kind of approach with those, but anyway, the thought process, you know, is the board willing to just have staff look at, you know, the possibility of making a slight
Sure.
modification to public purpose like that?
Certainly could
I'm
look
for
at,
that, yeah.
Yeah.
what we've
good-
got
good for
currently.
that. Unless I guess it doesn't matter to review minutes from a prior meeting.
Okay.
good with it also, but I'd probably also like to maybe suggest the public purpose stretch to cover the PD and the sign that they own.
The roving sign,
The roving sign also, which I don't think is specifically spelled out anywhere also.
it's not.
So, but to cover the public purpose of it, it would encompass that.
It would be
Yeah.
temporary, yeah, the temporary DOT,
And so,
PD
again,
type
public
of sign.
purpose
Yeah.
for information.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Fitzgerald?
I'm going to update you on Duncan McDonald House, of course.
All right.
We did purchase the antique switchboard that replicates the one that we had, and we actually have it in town. It's a very unique thing that you have a switchboard that has less than 100 exchanges on it. And we are attempting to look into actually modify it so you could have voices come out of it, so you could actually hear historical things come out of it. Like, I'm sorry, I can't switch you. She's at the doctor's office right now, or something like that. And we also are working pretty good on the building itself. The chimney on the Church Street side is going up. They are working on doing the rough plumbing. They're working on finishing up the piers at this time. The masons should be done either at the end of this week or beginning of next week, doing all the fireplaces and all the piers. So then they'll finish leveling the floor, and actually the floor joists will go in, and the underlayment for the floor will be going down, the Vantex, and then the floor will be going in. So it's going to move along very, very quickly.
All right. Thank you. Warren, you're up.
Mayor Gardner, members of the board, Mr. Spencer. Just a few items tonight. First is we've been talking a lot about the North Carolina sales tax and the various proposals that the state had laid out there in terms of changing the allocation formula and whatnot. But what they ultimately decided on was to expand the application of the sales tax, expand the base to include maintenance and repair services. So think of taking your car to Summerfield's, and you're going to see a charge on there you hadn't seen before, compliments of the state of North Carolina. However, the town of Waxhaw will benefit from that. Allocation formulas will change, and rates will not change, but just the expansion of the base is the only thing that did change. We talked about a special census if they did something based on population. That didn't come to pass. So this increased revenue will be directed towards rural and suburban counties. So Union County, I think Union County government is going to see a net gain of about $3 million in sales tax revenue through this. And Waxhaw is going to see an increase of about $90,000 in sales tax revenue beginning next fiscal year. So that, after that long drawn-out process, that's going to be the bottom line of what's included. I think it's effective either May or June of next year. So that'll be effective or impact our FY 16-17 annual budget in a positive way. Downtown parking study. This is one of the initiatives identified by the Board of Commissioners. I know that Don Fisher and Kurt White sat down had a conference call with a consultant, and they're starting work on that project. There are various steps will be included, obviously collecting and analyzing data. There'll be a public outreach component, projecting a 5 to 10 year parking demand in the downtown area, coming back with some conceptual parking plans and a final report. So that process should be completed based on their timeline by the end of the calendar year. So that'll be relatively quick. Of course, the downtown folks will be involved in that process as well. You know, and related to, we've got a variety of projects that the board identified through their strategic initiatives for this fiscal year. So we've got a lot of work that's ramping up. Just, you know, I know there's been a lot of questions about what's the town doing about transportation. Well, you just saw the traffic study or the parking study downtown, and the next 6 items are also transportation related. Obviously, you let the contract for the engineering work for the redesign of Kensington Drive at your last meeting. And related to that, Kimley Horn is also going to be looking at the intersection of Kensington Drive and Waxhaw Marvin Road. If you'll recall, St. Matt's Church as well as Landover have a responsibility to make improvements to that intersection. So I think we have come down that those organizations will put money in a kitty, so to speak, and then the town will manage manage that process as part of its overall work to Kensington Drive. That would be the most efficient way to do that. In addition to that intersection, I think Kensington Drive and Highway 16, I know Kimley Horn is collecting data on that intersection to some degree as it relates back to some zoning or rezoning issues that have come forward. And we know that that intersection does not function properly, so they're going to come back with some recommendations related to that intersection as well. We're finally making progress on the Gray-Byram Highway 16 intersection improvements. That's another one that Landover was responsible for making improvements. We've got the right group of parties at the table now, so I expect to be making some positive headway on that one. And everybody knows that's an extremely dangerous, unsignalized intersection. And then Waxhaw Parkway, Highway 16, we've completed the design work. We don't have funding for signal at this intersection, but we have completed the design work for a signal at Waxhaw Parkway and Highway 16. And we've also completed the design work for Bonds Grove Church Road and Highway 16, that intersection, in terms of signalization. So there's a lot of work that has been going on for months now. It predates me, some of it, but so there's quite a bit of transportation-related focus in the town right now. Some other things, obviously, tonight you're going to hear about the UDO rewrite and a recommendation related to that project. Chaplain and staff are completing the operations agreement with the YMCA. We will hopefully, assuming the operations agreement goes smoothly from here on out, we'll be closing on the 13 acres related to the YMCA project in November. The Carolina Thread Trail, Natalie, and the footbridge associated with that into South Carolina, which will be the first North Carolina-South Carolina connection of the Carolina Thread Trail, should be completed in October. Natalie's been working hard on that. Phase 2 implementation of our wayfinding. You can see Phase 1 standing proud along the roadways. So we'll come back with Phase 2, and ultimately there will be a Phase 3. And on October 22nd, the Board of Commissioners are going to have an economic development workshop. And just little odds and ends, we continue to see strong residential growth, and a lot of interest in residential development in Waxhaw. And interestingly, this will play into our economic development workshop. We're also starting to see more inquiries related to commercial development, even some light industrial. So in the 6 months that I've been here, I've had very little of that, but in the last month or so, we're starting to see a little bit more interest in the commercial side, and even for the first time, some industrial speculation potentially. So, oops, let me go back. This is hard to see, but we've had challenges with our website, but ultimately you're going to be able to go on the website and keep track or see how the town is doing through a scorecard related to the strategic initiatives that the board set out starting this fiscal year. And you can see the various bars represent the percentage we are along. The green one relates to how far along we are in the fiscal year. The yellow ones relate back specifically to the various initiatives that you have identified. And then you'd be able to go or click on the right-hand side and get more detail and dig down to really get the notes on what's, where we are on some of the initiatives that, or all the initiatives that the board has set out. So that's going to be a scorecard that we're keeping. And that's actually an actual snapshot of it. By the end of the year, everything should be 100. And if it's not, I'm sure it'll be reflected in my evaluation. So we're working hard to get that done. But anyways, and it should be in the next few weeks that we would have that loaded into our or on our website for the public to view. So that's a plan. And Kathy Queen was instrumental in getting that done. So I appreciate her work on that. So, and that's it. Questions?
Okay.
All right, thank
Any
you.
questions for Warren?
Oh,
Yes.
thank you, Wendy. Wendy just reminded me that this is Melody's 1-year anniversary with the town of Waxhaw.
Oh,
There you go. So Wendy bailed me out of the ditch one more time on personnel recommendations. So thank you.
well, congratulations, Melody, and we're delighted to have you still with us, and many more years to come. Okay, So, no items of old business. We'll start with the first item of new business, consideration and possible approval of the Historic Preservation Commission's request to become a certified local government for the purpose of attaining additional funding. Lisa?
Alrighty. The Historic Preservation Commission has recommended that we apply for Certified Local Government Status, or CLG. Art O'Donnell, Max Oliver, and I went to a training several months ago and learned about the CLG program that actually gives grants to local governments, and I'll go through it just a little bit. It comes down from the federal government. In 1966, the National Historic Preservation Act established a state historic preservation office in each state. And in 1980, the act was amended and added a local partnerships, which were the CLGs for governments. So it's a partnership between the certified local government, the State Historic Preservation Office, and the National Park Service. The purpose of the CLG program was to ensure the broadest participation in historic preservation and maintaining the standards of the National Historic Preservation Act and the Secretary of the Interior standards for historic preservations. It's also to enrich, develop, and help maintain local historic preservation programs in cooperation with the State Historic Preservation Office, and to provide financial and technical assistance to further these purposes. So the grants are coming from the federal government. They give the state historic preservation offices a certain percentage of funding. That is a non-competitive grant. They just automatically disperse these funds to the state. 10% of that funding has to go directly to the certified local governments for 50-50 matching grants. And these can be for architectural or archaeological surveys, National Register nominations, preservation planning, design guidelines, architectural plans or feasibility studies, and only CLGs are eligible for federal grant money towards physical restoration and stabilization. If you're an underrepresented community, you're given the top priority and no matches required. Last year, $500,000 was available for all the states. And what this translates into is that there's always going to be a minimum of $25,000 for each state, and that's divided amongst all the CLGs that apply for the grant monies. This past year, there was $95,000 for North Carolina, and I've spoken with the state office, and they think that there will be $95,000 available this year also. The process for becoming a certified local government is that you have to have an active and learning local historic preservation commission. You have to go to training. You have to have laws for designation and protection, which we do have in our UDO. You have to have commission members. We provided their resumes and what their experience was. And then we have to have the certification agreement, which is before you tonight. We submit this application to the State Historic Office. They have 60 days to review it, and then they'll submit it to the National Park Service. The National Park Service will review it and notify the State Historic Preservation Office and Waxhaw in writing, and then Waxhaw become a certified local government and is eligible for grant funding. And that is all I had on that, and if you have any questions.
So is that, that particular pot of grant money, is that the only amount of money that comes available to a CLG?
Yes.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be a big major project.
Right, and it doesn't cost us anything.
It doesn't cost us anything.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. McCarter? I'd be happy to entertain a motion if you all are interested.
I have a question,
Yeah.
more so for Warren. Any pitfalls to be in, do you see this?
No downside?
And, and you would govern, much of the Historic Preservations Commission through their annual work plan, so you can kind of monitor what they're applying for and what the purpose would be.
I make a motion that we approve the request by the HPC to become a certified local government as listed here in their application in our agenda packet.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion is unanimous. Very good. Okay, next up, presentation and possible approval of awarding UDO rewrite contract to Studio Cascade not to exceed $168,955. Again, Ms. McCarter.
Okay, the town received 6 proposals, and they were Studio Cascade, Placemakers, LSL Planning, CodeWrite, Infocus, and Stewart. And we checked these off based off criteria in a spreadsheet, and I included that chart in your packet and came up with our top 3 recommendations: Studio Cascade, Placemakers, and LSL Planning. The ranking criteria included public participation and outreach, experience in ordinance writing and form-based codes, the sample ordinances that were provided, and the degree to which the items in the RFP were addressed. So the planning board interviewed the top 3 candidates on September 3rd and recommended Studio Cascade unanimously. The recommendation also included that the town work with Studio Cascade to shorten their timeline, because the timeline proposed was 18 months, which was a little longer than all the other consultants. The planning board also unanimously recommended an 8-member steering committee to include Thomas Dyer, I can't say his last name, Weiler, and James Matheson. Staff did not recommend a steering committee due to the technical and legal nature of the UDO that requires professional expertise. The RFP did request extensive community engagement, and Studio Cascade went above and beyond what was requested in the RFP. So the reasons that the planning board recommended Studio Cascade was because of their legal expertise. They have Al Benshoff on staff, which is with the Bro Law Firm, and he's here tonight, as well as Bill Grimes with Studio Cascade. So we have 2 members of the team here. Also, their preparedness. They had really familiarized themselves with the town, gone out and looked at current projects and land uses, and they addressed the scope of the RFP and really had a good understanding of it. Another reason was their excitement about the project and that they were teaming with a competitor. Bob Benford with Makers is teaming with Bill Grimes, and they are often competitors on certain projects, they said. So we thought that would be great to have opposing viewpoints coming in to both provide a well-rounded code. And so that's all I had, and Studio Cascade is here to give a presentation and answer any questions that you have.
Very good. Thank you. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Madam Board members, thank you for the invitation to come back. It's always a thrill to come back to North Carolina, work here on several projects, and Waxhaw, I hope, will be our next successful venture here. So we'll get the presentation up here in just a sec. I know you've had a long day. You've been here since 3 o'clock this afternoon, so I'll do what I can to keep it brief. We'll be here all night if you have a lot of questions and thoughts for us. So, a couple of weeks ago, your staff asked me to prepare a presentation to address 3 things. Wanted to know a little bit about the timeline. letting me down. I'm doing this right, right? The arrow that looks like it's pointing forward.
No, it's the one on the side.
Well, the next slide looks a lot like this slide, except it has some words on the top of it that say, we're going to talk tonight about process and timeline, about, oh, thank you, this is great.
Yeah, we're streaming live now, so you get to speak into the microphone so people at home can hear you.
Oh, nice. Broadcast into the living rooms with families waiting with bated breath to hear what I'll say. Okay, so anyway, so process and timeline, citizen engagement, and then also some of our initial thoughts about recommendations on whether we should go with a form-based code exclusively, something more Euclidean or traditional, or some kind of mix of the two. So this slide is making me hungry, actually. So, or if Al, is there an opportunity maybe to advance the slides manually? Oh, is it, but not on the, okay. So initially, we had proposed a schedule that did last about 18 months, and that was to get you through adoption and to begin some of the staff training after the adoption were to occur. We've wanted, as we were looking at that schedule, we wanted to make sure that we allowed enough time for the kind of assessment that we need to have. When we were preparing for the interview here on September, I saw the slide. When we were preparing for the interview on September 3rd, we started to go through an assessment of your existing UDO, had some comments on how extensive the work may need to be. So I think we have a pretty good idea on what types of things need to touch. Oh yes, I'd forgotten about this slide. Just a brief introduction. What you see is what you get. That was what we represented to the planning board on September 3rd. Al and I were both there, and so was Bob Bengford from Baker's Architects. So he's not here tonight. That's why we have the asterisk on what you see is what you get, but you will get at least Al and me working on this project with Bob, and we will be the people that you will see coming for all of these meetings as we propose them. Okay, so we were looking at our assessment phase, making sure that we allowed enough time for an assessment so we understand what it is that needs to be done, what needs to be touched, and that we're meeting with people who will be directly impacted by this UDO update. And then we also want to make sure that we have enough time not only so that we can go through a thorough process of engagement, we also want to make sure that we time the engagement activities so they make sense for the community members here. Having events in the summertime is usually very difficult because people are off doing something else. They don't want to attend meetings. So we're trying to build a schedule around winter, spring, and fall engagement activities. So that influenced our schedule planning quite a bit. And then we also understand that sometimes UDOs take a little bit longer than anticipated to go through the review and adoption process. And so we wanted to make sure that we got you the draft relatively quickly and then let your planning board, your staff, and also the board work through the code and make sure that it is exactly what you need. So that also played into our 18-month schedule. That being said, we still found ways that we can shorten it. We did have a chance to take a look at the planning board recommendation. We've taken it to heart. And so we're looking to complete our initial assessment of the issues by mid-December. That means I'll be working Friday after Thanksgiving, but that's okay. We're anticipating that we could have our first public workshop in January so that we can present the results of that assessment and get some community feedback on how we begin to translate all of your plans into code. And then we would do our storefront studio in the spring. I'm thinking March, early spring, so that we'll be in town for about a week or so and people can join with us. Staff is looking into a building for us downtown to use. And during that studio, we'll also have our second and third public workshops. We'll come back in May for a fourth workshop. And then in the RFP, you were looking for a couple of full-day sessions so that the consultant team would be available to speak with stakeholders, members of the community, and we're planning for those to happen in September. So you see that does give us that emphasis on a spring and then a fall process, and then coming back to the planning board to begin its public hearing cycle in November. Okay, so a little bit about engagement. Zoning is often a somewhat intimidating topic, and so a lot of our challenge, I think, will be finding ways to help the community not necessarily be intimidated, but also find some relevance in how changing the town's UDO might actually influence them and advance their aspirations for the community. So our process really will be stakeholder driven. We want to make sure that we engage the individuals and the organizations that are going to have a stake in the process's outcomes. So yes, involving the development community actively, but also looking at involving other agencies who make decisions based on land use actions that the city takes. So talking to school districts, talking to talking to NCDOT, talking to your utilities, and also even some of the private organizations. So homeowners associations will need to be involved in this process as well. So we want to make sure that we identify those stakeholders and really build the process around their involvement. We're also needing to make sure that the process is open for citizen input. Now, the town has done quite a lot of work on planning. You have a history of planning in this town over the last decade or so, and so we want to take advantage of that. A lot of people have been involved in these processes, and we want to make sure we invite them into this. Even though they may not necessarily have an official stakeholder position, they're citizens who will be concerned and who will be living with the outcome. So we've got to pull them into this process as well. Staff is a key component. We'll be working consistently and collaboratively with staff through this process. And then we also anticipate working closely with the planning board through this process as well. They were very interested in this process, of course, because they've put a lot of time into the policy changes. Oh, let me just go back to that slide real quick. Some of the things that we do, this is something that we did a project on in Hickory, where we modified their land development code. And this was an example of an exercise there where we took a look at different development types, and we walked the community members through what the different implications might be for the different development types, and I'm emphasizing types because that'll be important in just a couple slides, and how that actually might translate to a specific zoning framework. And it was something the community really worked up. Really enjoyed. This was something where community members, including Harry Hips, who wound up deciding to run for city council in Hickory, they really got into the exercise, and they were able to find kind of a tangible sense of recommendations on how they'd like to see the zoning evolve to meet those different development types. Really the main flagship of our public process proposal will be the storefront studio. We've done these in a number of communities in the past, and we will take up residents in town for a week. And we'll have an open studio that people can come and visit and interact directly with the consultant teams when it's convenient for the individuals to come in and interact with the consultant teams. So we'll have a gallery that'll describe the process, and we'll have work tables. We've also expanded these things so we could develop a booth. This man right here on the right was a steering committee member. This man here on the left was a proponent for recycling. Anyway, it was a studio that we were able to take out into the street and engage the public directly with a series of exercises and trade-offs and try to figure out how different approaches and strategies that we were working with might actually play out. This is a project in Southern Pines. This one was. But I also think one of our major objectives is to find a way to simplify your code. Your code is almost like a coral, where over the years things have been added to it, and there are some things that really do beg for simplification and streamlining. Some of that may happen in the text, but we also think some of it may happen in the map as well. This is an example from Hickory, North Carolina, where the zoning map looked this way when we walked in the door, and it looked like this when we walked out. So we had opportunities to really simplify and aggregate some of the zoning districts. And that went over quite well with staff and with the community. So you wanted to know some of my thoughts about code recommendations. And I'll just say right now, using Highway 16 as an example, we need to make sure that we translate your plans into a code framework that makes sense and really honors the planning work that you've done. A lot of your planning work is really design focused. A lot of your planning work is character focused. And a lot of your code work is community focused. And in some ways, form-based code is really quite good in echoing that. But I think there are some ways where form-based code may not be so good at echoing that. I was talking about development types a few minutes ago, and what I think we're looking at is something that is more of a type-based code. It's not necessarily a universally form-based code, and it's not Euclidean, but it is a hybrid of the two. There are also some recent legislative actions that limit the degree to which communities can regulate the character of development in single-family zoning districts, duplex zoning districts. So in some ways, that takes form-based code in its entirety off the table. But when we look at like areas like your Highway 16 corridor, we think we do see a nice candidate for a form-based zoning concept, and I think that there's an opportunity for the studio to really advance that by integrating some master planning activities for Highway 16 into that week-long studio. So we can actually work with the people who have the properties, who are looking at developing those properties, and develop a coding system that is form-based that really suits that particular corridor. And that same ideology may also work in places that have other character elements that you really want to preserve in the face of new development. You did a form-based code for downtown. I imagine that our work will go through and audit how well that is working for you, and we may suggest some revisions. I didn't really realize that until I heard the testimony this evening, but it's just part of what zoning has, is that kind of a feedback loop to make sure that it does continue to serve you well over time. The teammate that we're working with, Makers, sometimes rival, always friend, Bob Bengford, has done some work in Boise that I think is a good example of what we might see as an evolution for the Highway 16 corridor, where there's a very similar highway in Boise. And one of the first things that they did was to identify districts around these intersection areas. They don't come up so well on the screen, but they translated these areas that were of very high aesthetic and functional importance and designed a regulating plan. If you've been down the form-based code before, you understand that term. Regulating plan is where you start to identify the development character based on the public realm that they face. So they were developing street types that established the framework for regulating plan, and then developed individual development and design standards that would apply to those different street environments. Now, sometimes form-based codes are more than just regulatory, they're also inspirational. And so what we're also considering doing is including something like design guidelines, where we would modify design guidelines the town has already adopted and include them in a format that is compatible with either a Euclidean or form-based code environment, whichever district those particular guidelines would apply to. We do need to make sure that the standards fit, and so part of our work is also to evaluate what our standards might result in terms of a built form, so that it would be compatible with the residential area or the commercial area or the mixed-use area, whatever it is. And that's something that we would do whether it's a form-based code or a Euclidean code. We've got to make sure that the product that you get is something that you expect as you're developing the code. So that's another step in our process. And we also have to make sure that the coding language is clear and accessible, that people who are looking to develop a piece of property, or people who are investing in property near the property that's likely to be developed, have a very clear understanding of what the law permits. We want to make sure that and it's one of the nice things about a form-based code, but it's also capable in a Euclidean code, is to condense your regulatory requirements to a single page. So you have a zoning district and you know what the minimum entitlements are or maximum entitlements are for that particular property in that zoning district. So that's something else we would be shooting for, is that kind of clarity and accessibility, not only in your standards but also in your design guidelines. So if someone wants to know how the city or the town would like to see a building frontage treated in a certain area, it's not necessarily a requirement, but it's more of a suggestion. We have to make sure that those things are also presented clearly and unambiguously in the plan. Now, character is an important component, and I think I need to engage a bit more directly here. This is a short video that we showed to the planning board when we were here September 3rd, but at great personal risk, we took these videos while driving, just to demonstrate that we were really trying to pay attention to a somewhat diverse character set that you have in your residential areas here in this community. You are not painted with a single brush, and we have to make sure that our standards reflect that. And this is also just kind of a test to see how well Bob and I actually work together. So he was steering and I was taking the pictures. Okay. So if there are any questions, I'll certainly take as long as you'd like. I'm on West Coast time, so we can go late.
All right.
And Al Benshoff with the Bro Firm is also here tonight too.
Very good. Well, I just want to say that, watching your presentation, I really feel like you understand the challenge at hand for our community. You're right, we have done a lot of planning work in the last decade, but the challenge, of course, of ensuring that the results that planning work brings us are what we're anticipating is, that's where the rubber meets the road. So I'm looking forward to, if the board chooses to approve the contract, to working with you and your team. Do we have any questions for Mr. Grimes? No?
Great.
No questions?
Great.
Did a good
Thank you
job
very much.
presenting.
We're really excited to be here.
All right, so,
Just one, he mentioned Hickory a couple of times, and just for clarification, I had no role in the choosing of Studio Cascade. I try to stay away from planners. But I will say, I do know, and he didn't know me before tonight, but they did a great job
In
for
Hickory.
us in Hickory, for whatever that's worth. So y'all did an outstanding job.
very good. Okay, so, do we want to have a motion to approve awarding the UDO rewrite contract to Studio Cascade?
And Madam Mayor,
Yes,
it'd
sir.
probably be best to have them deemed the most qualified and most responsive, and probably either authorize the town manager to execute the contract in an amount not to exceed 168, $955, or you could have the contract brought back to you, but if you do, you're gonna lose a few weeks
Okay,
with that. So, most qualified, most responsive, and authorize the town manager to execute the contract or bring it back to you.
okay, so
Your
glad
preference.
to entertain a motion according to the language that Chaplain just gave us.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have any discussion?
No.
Commissioner Hunt? No. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion is unanimous. Congratulations. Look forward to working with you. Okay, discussion on board liaison appointments to new committees. Commissioner Fitzgerald?
Well, I wasn't really prepared to speak tonight, but, I'm not really a great speaker, but I brought this up to Melody because it was really not really crystal clear who is what
liaison
liaison
to
to
which?
what board, because we changed 3/4 of the board in the last 2 weeks.
Okay.
So I wanted to make sure that it's crystal clear. I would like to know when I'm supposed to show up to what meeting.
Right. Okay. So we've got the list of the current boards and committees in here with the gaps on the, blank spaces on the 4 newly formed committees. So how would you all like to
Actually,
fill those?
blank on 2 of the committees. Design and the promotions.
Okay,
Those
okay,
are the 2.
okay. My list here doesn't have the ERC and OAC filled in, but I presume the ERC is
I've been
you
doing
still,
both those
right.
for some time.
It's just not on the list here. Okay. Okay.
Okay. So are we going to attempt to fill the open 2 spots that are there? Is that what the purpose is?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I see that I'm currently listed as the ABC Board Liaison, and I'm good with that. And the Board of Adjustment, I think that probably meets once a year.
Maybe.
So
Yeah.
so I'm good to take another board, or another board for liaison if y'all want me to do something.
Okay. Well, we've got,
Yeah, I'd be happy to do design.
okay. And how about the, what is the name?
Promotion.
Promotions. Who wants to do promotions? Mike?
Yeah,
unless anyone else has it, but I'm only gonna be on it for 2 months, just, make everybody aware.
Okay.
3 months, December 15th.
Okay, so,
Three,
so we're putting,
I have no issue with that.
Commissioner Hunt on the design committee and Commissioner Stewart on the promotions committee. Does that sound good?
If everyone else is okay with that, unless someone else wants, I'm good.
Okay. We don't need a motion on that, do you?
Since nobody really, just read each one.
Okay, all right, so, at Chaplain's suggestion, I'm gonna read the entire list, and then I'll ask for a motion to confirm, okay? ABC and Board of Adjustment, Commissioner Hunt, CPSC, which one's that?
Just a clarification question
Comp Plan, yeah, okay.
on the Board of Adjustments. Didn't we suggest that they primarily interact with Warren?
Yeah, we said no, and the liaison's not necessary.
That the liaison was not
So,
necessary for that?
okay, so remove the Board of Adjustment liaison altogether, since that really needs to go through staff.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, so let me start again. ABC Board, Commissioner Hunt. Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee, Commissioner Warner. Design and Appearance Committee, Commissioner Hunt. Economic Restructuring Committee, Commissioner Maher. Historic Preservation Commission, Commissioner Fitzgerald. Organization Advisory Committee, Commissioner Maher. Planning Board, Commissioner Warner. Promotions Committee, Commissioner Stewart. And PCR, Parks and Rec, Parks, Culture, and Recreation Committee, Commissioner Stewart. That sounds good. I'll entertain a motion to confirm. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Okay, we have one item for closed session that is an FYI, right?
Correct.
And there will be no action coming out of the closed session. So at this point, I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session.
For personnel.
For personnel,
So moved.
thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight.
Yeah, thank you for all the new
You'll all be able to get home in time to watch the Muppets.
meetings.
Yeah.